we've shifted our focus away from the skiing, the technique, the process, onto results and have to, must, pressure. We've time traveled, right? We're thinking
Hmm.
about things that have not happened yet. We're trying to manipulate things based on what judges want to see, based on what you think is going to score the best. Now our focus has completely shifted. It's not a mystery to me why all of a sudden we are performing worse at competitions than we are in training. And I don't necessarily believe that it has much to do with the pressure of judges watching. It's that you manipulated your run to fit what the judges are wanting, right? So I think what we talk about a lot is business as usual.
Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I am your host and coach, Tyler Johnson. And whether you've tuned in to elevate your mindset, your game, or just your day, you are in the right place. My guest this episode is a former Division I athlete turned mental performance specialist. Her philosophy revolves around being aware, present, and being in love with what you do. Freedom will follow from that. She's worked with a wide variety of sports, from getting guys ready for NFL draft combine prep to Cortina Olympics in just a few weeks. Please welcome to the Elevate podcast, Stephanie Zavilla. Stephanie, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am well. I am well. It's great to have you on.
Great to be here.
Wanted to just to kind of start, I guess, for the listeners, bring them up to speed about you a little bit, just kind of share a little bit more about what your role is and what you do and kind of what led you professionally into doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is my, oh my gosh, 13th season, I believe, serving as the director of sports performance for the Winter Park Competition Center. So my background is in sports psychology. I went to the University of Denver. And while I was there, I got the opportunity to do an internship with Vail Ski and Snowboard Academy, where I really fell in love with the winter sports industry. I had skied, casually, recreationally throughout my life, but getting introduced to that world and of competitive skiing and riding was really enamoring, and I just love the culture. So I decided to pursue that with everything that I had, and ended up getting connected with Winter Park. And so it's been really fun spending 13 years with these athletes and coaches in this incredible community. Yeah, and sports psychology is just absolutely my passion. I played Division I golf in college and went through a massive performance slump and got introduced with a phenomenal sports psychologist out of Denver and fell in love right away and recognized that was what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So here I am, 13, well, I guess 14, 15 years later.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, I know you also, in your own athletics, I know one of the other things in kind of your history uh, is kind of the concussion topic.
Oh, yeah.
I know we were just talking about skiing, and I grew up in that age where, just throw on a stocking cap, rip it down the mountain. Um, then, I ended up playing football where we were very conscious of, what's kind of going on in there. And so I wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit about just some of the things that coaches and athletes can be aware of, and maybe if you've got some myths to debunk.
Yeah,
But yeah, start with maybe if you wouldn't mind some of your personal story
absolutely.
and kind of how you conquered what happened to you.
Yeah. Obviously living in the mountains, we like to do really fun, risky sports. And that's just kind of the inherent nature of, not even just to the mountains, team sports, anything. Um, and I think concussion is one of those injuries that, everybody calls the invisible injury because there's no cast, there's no crutches, and it's hard to know what's going on in there. So what happened to me, I was tubing on the hill and hit somebody. I was not wearing a helmet, hit somebody who was in sort of the landing zone and immediately lost consciousness. Um, Drove myself home and, knew enough to know that I had a concussion. But at that age, I was 25, 26, sort of that invincibility feeling was like, I can handle this, I'll just stay out until I feel a little better. And Contacted a doctor that I knew, but very briefly, and she kind of said the same thing. Just, relax, get well, and try and limit stimulation, things like that. Um, I ended up going to work about 2 weeks later and was intending to kind of dip my toes back in and slowly reintroduce myself to a full schedule. Unfortunately, we had an emergency happen at the Hill, and I kind of got thrown in the deep end. And from that point forward, was working extremely long hours and with extreme sort of emotional ups and downs. So I went from 0 to 100, and I was like, well, I feel fine, so I guess I'm better. And I wasn't, spoiler alert, and just went back to skiing, went back to my life, went back to, my 26-year-old habits of, not necessarily watching what I eat, alcohol consumption, things like that. And what I noticed over time was tasks that were ordinarily, well practiced, easy for me, became really difficult. I started to lose long-term memory. I started to lose short-term memory. I started to forget friends' names of 10, 15 years. I developed a stutter, which was a strange one. My sleep was completely disrupted. Crazy mood swings, ups and downs, crying one moment, angry the next, extremely happy after that, and just started to kind of question, like, hey, what's going on here? This can't be my normal now.
Right.
So I ended up going to, quite a few neurologists, and it ended up being quite a struggle. A lot of times people would sort of look at my case and just sort of say, you have migraines, like you're fine. We can treat it with medication or whatnot. And at that time, I, was obviously still pulling along, long hours and
Mhm.
working and playing and having fun. But then I started to develop sort of like, I guess the best way I can describe them is micro seizures, where I would feel energy rushing across the top of my brain, once every minute on the minute. So um, then I was really starting to get concerned. And yet, still, neurologists were sort of saying, no, this is just you have migraines. And I started getting really frustrated and losing a lot of hope. Finally got connected with a phenomenal doctor, Dr. Chad Pressmack out of Resilience Code, and he's just a brilliant neurosurgeon. And he said, "I believe you." And the emotional release just from hearing that was pretty amazing. And we basically underwent a full concussion rehabilitation program, where I actually basically moved back to Denver to spend the entire summer. And what he did is sort of pick apart every single piece of my life, how I ate, how I recovered, cognitive therapy, vestibular therapy, just looking at literally everything. And through that whole process, I learned so much about myself. But more importantly, I got my life back. My memory started to come back. I started to be able to function, put words together, make coherent sentences, and just really feel whole again and confident again and happy again. And now, first and only concussion, I still have a seizure disorder, and I still definitely struggle under stress. And so I really work hard to manage through my diet, through stress management techniques. Um, but because of that, I really become an advocate for our athletes. Concussion has a lot of, like you mentioned, like myth and misunderstanding around it and stigma. And so we've worked really hard at the competition center to put together training programs for our athletes, our coaches, our parents to better educate what concussions are, how far their symptoms can vary, how long they can persist. Maybe it's not always the typical loss of consciousness. Remember apple, dog, house, and you're good. But more, there can be a variety of symptoms that are associated with concussion and how to watch out for those. And then, making sure that we're sticking really closely to the state protocol of removal from play immediately to try and, protect our athletes from further injury and further harm and post-concussive syndrome, which, was my journey. So we've worked really hard in trying to implement those programs. And we have seen, a pretty great response over the years in terms of acceptance and importance placed on concussion rehabilitation.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask you, kind of on that rehabilitation, I see a lot. I think it's still, yeah, one of those things you're still constantly learning more about. But um, the little I do know, that when we do have that concussion and we have that kind of reduced peripheral vision and those kind of things, we can be more susceptible to other injuries.
Mhm.
I know in football, there's some data about not having that vision increases, your likelihood of ACL tears and other kinds of things. Um, are there cognitive mechanisms that you like or have seen to either test or train our vision to kind of just make our brains a little bit stronger? Or what are
There are, yeah, there are plenty of, especially under fatigue. You can do reaction time training. You can do just cognitive exercises under fatigue can be really helpful. Um, Absolutely, vision is a piece of the puzzle. I think another really important piece of the puzzle is just vestibular, and that goes hand in hand with ocular motor. So, part of my concussion rehab was vestibular ocular motor therapy, and a lot of that was training my eyes to track correctly. So, especially for young athletes who have sustained concussions in the past or even several, which, a lot of athletes have. Um, Looking at getting certain screenings with your primary care to kind of assess for that. Sometimes these things kind of fly under the radar, and we don't necessarily know that there might be some dysfunction. Vestibular ocular motor screening, VOMS test, or like a SCAT6, are both tests that your primary care can do, and can give you some insight as to are my eyes tracking appropriately? Is my vestibular system working appropriately? And from there, getting therapy that's very simplistic and easy to do and quick to do, quite honestly, um, allows athletes to sort of recover that piece of the puzzle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that,
Yeah.
that helps me. I understood about half those tests you mentioned. But you're so smart. But yeah, I was curious about that. Another coach, I've seen some cool, just like simple stick things that are just,
Yes.
training that focus, which I think more in a macro, I think a lot of coaches are frustrated. My kids can't focus. And so I think, when we, even it is some simple drills on training where our eyes go, where our ears
Mhm.
go. Sometimes those are, I think, needed with young athletes, which kind of leads me to my next question with your experience. You've been doing this for a decade plus in kind of the same area. What are some things that maybe you've seen or differences, uh, and especially in kind of the competitive programs you're in with kids? Maybe just some observational things they are more challenged with or struggle with more in general than maybe you saw when you first kind of got on the scene.
Mm. That's a good question. I mean, I think, when I entered into this world, it was roughly, 2011. Um, some things have shifted in the world, and you see young people with technology being a central part of their life, which obviously has a lot of positive implications, but also we're now starting to see some pretty tough things and challenges that athletes are now having to overcome that wasn't quite the case when I first got on the scene. So I think a big piece that we work on is, like you mentioned, focus, but through the avenue of mindfulness and being purposeful in the present moment. And I think a lot of us don't really live in the present moment as much as we'd like to say we do. And so we do a lot of work with that through attention allocation training, being able to center yourself in the moment, ground yourself, manage any, I guess, stress reactions through self-regulation techniques to get back to the moment. If we think about sort of like an overactive, hyperstimulated brain, it's incredibly difficult to then bring yourself back into a moment and focus all of your attention on one thing. So we're finding that a lot of athletes have split attention on so many different things, then get frustrated when they can't do those things. So we teach a lot of, okay, let's take a moment, let's take a few deep, slow and low breaths, longer exhales, and bring yourself back using like maybe a mantra. Is my head where my feet are? Do what I can with what I have, sort of just coming back to here and now. And then being able to choose where you put your attention. And it's a practice, not easy. And I think the other piece of the puzzle is, with that technology, athletes at younger ages are being exposed to mechanisms of comparison, i.e., social media, and then sort of forming beliefs about themselves based on what they see and interpret from those channels. So working a lot in self-compassion, and hand in hand with that attention is, am I giving away my power and my attention and my energy to people, things, experiences that I see on social media when I could be using that to enhance my own experience or my own goals?
Yeah.
So just sort of awareness around that.
Yeah. What are things that maybe you've done when you see athletes falling into that comparison trap that seems to be everywhere? And if we're not paying attention, other people sometimes like to show you.
Uh-huh.
Even if you're not, some young kids aren't paying attention, but then someone, quickly shows them where they stand
Mhm.
somewhere. But yeah, that's pervasive, I think in young
Big
people. And I
time.
think my experience with that, I think even in my own life, that saying of like, don't compare your chapter 4 to someone's chapter 16, kind of thing, where I see that quite often where a young athlete, maybe in the skiing world, sees a Michaela, a Tess Johnson, a someone, and they start measuring themselves against their journey.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
that's a tough thing. But I think when we can get, I guess my other experience as athletes, like, all right, if you wanted to become that, is it going to require the best version of you? Yes. Okay, let's go for that.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
what are things that you've seen and tried to help athletes shift that detrimental mode to healthy mode?
Yeah. We talk a lot about, um, well, first, that idea of attention and energy as a resource. Am I giving it away versus can I bring it here and focus on my 1% goals, getting 1% better every day? And really about owning your path. Like you mentioned, not comparing your chapter 4 to their chapter 16. We never know where somebody is in their journey and their path, what ups and downs they've experienced versus yours, and those two things can't possibly be compared. And so we talk a lot about this idea of, the Latin root of competition being striving together, and reevaluating or reshaping how we see our opponent, and seeing them more as a teammate or collaborator in rising the sport and rising ourselves. So, okay, striving together, a little bit different than sort of how we've been taught to see competition, us versus them. Now we sort of reshape our perspective to, I celebrate my opponent because their level of play is inspiring and motivating me to bring my best. And in doing so, both of us are honoring the game and honoring ourselves. So sort of reshaping how we see that, so that it's not necessarily, oh, I'll never be as good as them, but let me observe with curiosity what they're doing, how that fits into my plan, and then devoting my energy and attention into what I can do with this moment to get myself one step closer.
Yeah. Can you talk about maybe one step further of how important that is in your sports when I think there is that dynamic of your teammate is maybe your toughest opponent, and
Absolutely.
there's a different structure to the team than maybe some other you know team sports like soccer, basketball, things like that. But I think, can you expand on that dynamic and why it's important in the culture and to the next point, the culture performing better?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think in small ways we see it in even team sports, right? Scouting, trying to get into the college, into college programs. You might feel that comparison factor when your teammate gets noticed, right? And then all of a sudden now they are your opponent, but also your teammate. I think in skiing and snowboarding, it's very blatant and obvious that the person next to you that you train with every day, that we support and work with, is also your number one opponent. And we talk a lot about how team allows us this togetherness, this relatedness, this beautiful support system that allows us to grow together. And so it sort of all comes back to that idea of striving together. I'm happy for you. I'm excited for you, and that happiness and excitement is genuine, um, because that pushes me. And how boring would this sport be if I had nothing to chase and nothing to grow towards? Um, does it happen? Of course, right? Does it happen that we get frustrated or upset when somebody surpasses you? But then it's okay. You had a human thought, and that human reaction is okay. Take a deep breath, and what's going to be effective moving forward? What's going to help you bring your attention and energy back to things that you can control? Because we recognize that our opponents are things outside of our control, and yeah, it's not really worth spending that energy and attention focusing on that. But let me bring it back and okay, what's my 1% that I can do today that gets me closer?
Love it. Uh, your sport also, I think, there's pressure everywhere. It comes from different things, but the kind of two runs and you're done.
Yeah. Or
um,
one.
yeah. And so it's yeah, there can be a lot of travel and preparation for, a very short amount of time, a short performance, a short opportunity. Um, can you talk about ways that you get kids to see that pressure is a privilege, as the cliche goes, and see it as, maybe opportunities, um, and maybe we'll get to the second part after this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sometimes it's one and done. Other times it's two. But even when there's two, there's this weird association that athletes tend to make. Oh my gosh, if I mess up my first, now I have to do good on my second. Or let me just put down a safety run so that I have the freedom to go forward on my second. And all of those to me means I'm manipulating my plan, what I've trained, right? I have to go faster, I have to be bigger, I have to, right? Now all of a sudden we've shifted our focus away from the skiing, the technique, the process, onto results and have to, must, pressure. We've time traveled, right? We're thinking
Hmm.
about things that have not happened yet. We're trying to manipulate things based on what judges want to see, based on what you think is going to score the best. Now our focus has completely shifted. It's not a mystery to me why all of a sudden we are performing worse at competitions than we are in training. And I don't necessarily believe that it has much to do with the pressure of judges watching. It's that you manipulated your run to fit what the judges are wanting, right? So I think what we talk about a lot is business as usual. You've trained your body to do what it knows how to do. And the way I kind of explain it to athletes is, um, we have a balance beam 1 inch off the ground. We're completely confident in our ability to walk across it because, of course, I can walk in a straight line. We put that 6 feet in the air. Now, all of a sudden, our body gets tense. We're nervous. We're watching every step. We're thinking about what could happen. If I misstep, I'll fall. And we're doing the exact same thing. It's the exact same motion,
Yeah.
right? But now all of a sudden, because of my perception and the way I've interpreted it, I'm now walking with caution and hesitancy, trying not to mess up versus just skiing to ski great and skiing to enjoy the process. So we work a lot in present moment thinking, trusting the process, trusting the moment, your effort, preparation as confidence, um, and business as usual. Like go out there and do what you've trained your body to do. And then between runs, a complete reset where, oh, I'm starting a new competition. It's not because if this happens, then this, or then I must do this. It's one run, pause, completely new day, run two. A practice, no doubt, and really hard to do, easy to say, but when athletes practice it and get better at it, then all of a sudden they start to feel this freedom and this fun that comes
Mhm.
back where I'm not skiing to not mess up. I'm skiing to just put my best out there. Because what you do see, even on top of that, is okay, an athlete's goal might be I just need to get to the bottom. I need to make it to the bottom, which is still a result goal and not really about the process in any way. And then you see the athletes ski cautiously, hesitantly, safely. They do cross, but then they're pretty upset because they're like,
Mhm.
I had so much more to give.
Mhm.
And they feel unfulfilled,
Mhm.
if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah, totally.
Hmm.
Um, the, the other layer about the pressure I wanted to ask was, how can parents um, learn to, support their child where they're at, get them in the present moment? Sometimes they like to hit fast forward a lot,
Oh, yes.
um, but and project. But yeah, I think you've probably seen some things, some great examples, and some examples at the other end of the spectrum,
Mhm.
where they can almost, they're a detriment to the performance of their kid. And what are some things that can develop a healthy relationship and support system for the young athletes?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. Yeah, looking at some of the parent clinics that we do, and just based on the observations I've seen over the years, parents are always acting out of love and what they think is best for their athlete, and that's a beautiful thing. And sometimes it's just recognizing, okay, I need to take a step back and regulate myself first. Regulate myself first based on frustrations I might be feeling, assumptions I might be making, um, and then, coming together collaboratively with my athlete to have open discussions about their experience. A lot of material that I pull from is John O'Sullivan Changing the Game Project, and he's pretty phenomenal. And one of the favorite things I've ever heard him say was before a race or competition, the athlete just needs to hear, I love you, I'm proud of you, I can't wait to watch you ski. And after the comp, I love you, I'm proud of you, it was so amazing to watch you ski. Um, Recognizing an athlete could never ski well enough to gain more of your love or ski poorly enough to lose it. Um, Such a powerful statement. And I think
Yeah,
even just grounding parents in this idea of, okay, why did you put your athlete in sport to begin with? Um, was it to get medals, to get a scholarship, to get notoriety, or was it life skills, connection, that sort of thing? It's usually that, right? And if it's that, then reconnecting with those values and those
yeah,
goals, and then choosing to point out the good when you see it. Like, okay, your athlete crashed halfway down the course. I'm so proud of the courage you displayed today when you started and when you got back up and continued to fight down to the finish.
yeah,
Like, those are those moments where we can really reconnect with those values and those goals of why we are in sport in the first place, which then, bonus side, stirs that pot of motivation, that self motivation, where athletes then start to feel empowered and feel good about themselves and have a healthy relationship with mistakes.
yeah. I like that that kind of internal gesture. It's one of the things I hear a lot from coaches, and sometimes the generation label slapping, is they're not intrinsically motivated.
Yeah.
Right. And I think especially in the high school environment, sometimes at that age, I'm yet to see like just a team full of middle schoolers jump in and man, just all of them are intrinsically fired up.
Nope.
Right. I lean more towards my experience is yeah, there's some kids that stand out that are just in that 1%, and you'll hear and learn about them.
Oh
Right.
yeah.
And But when it comes to developing life skills and being intrinsically motivated, I think it takes coaches to demonstrate and steward that along their process. Um, are there other ways that you've seen, I think, having kids set intentions and break down their little things into daily and weekly goals instead of just the big ones that are shiny and beautiful. We want them to chase those, but can you talk about how we can get kids to take what coaches have to offer and stoke that internal motivation?
Yeah. Well, and I'll answer that in two ways. So, we do a lot of work with coaches in terms of looking at the different components of the self-determination theory, which goes hand in hand with intrinsic motivation. Relatedness, like creating a team culture of people that support one another. It's an environment where I'm okay to fail. I'm not going to be made fun of. I'm not going to, lose any of my friends over that. Autonomy, right? Like giving athletes some form of influence or sway or power in their own surroundings, allowing them to choose drills, allowing them to lead, and then, competence, allowing athletes to feel progress, which then goes to working with the athletes on, okay, how can I set these big, beautiful goals, but then break down into the daily habits, the moments of engagement that I have within my power here to do today that might get me there, and really differentiating between goals and expectations.
Mm.
The only real thing I should ever expect out of myself is just attitude and effort, right? Versus I should be skiing at this level. Okay, maybe that's a goal. I want to be in the top 10 or whatever. But should you? Is that something we can even control? I don't think so. So, rerouting athletes to understand that expectations, attitude, and effort, goals, let's break down into, I've mentioned it a few times, but that 1% kind of going off of what the British national cycling team did. Let me break this down into teeny tiny things that are within my control that don't feel overwhelming, that I can track. And one of my favorite things about 1% goals is, let's say you create a habit tracker or some way of keeping yourself accountable. I want to meditate 4 days out of the week. You set these reasonable goals, and it teaches self-compassion within that, that I'm human and sometimes 4 days is not possible for me, and that's okay. So kind of getting athletes to come down to earth, recognize and celebrate successes along the way, celebrating the small steps so that we can feel that competence that stokes the fire, so to speak, but then also keeps us hungry for that goal, but recognizing that even if I don't make the goal, but I got to here, that is something, and that's something to be proud of. Versus, oh, I didn't get top 10, I'm a failure. That's pretty black and white, and that doesn't really feed the fire at all.
Resonates with me because I just realized in my own life and habits, I realized I needed to apply more self-compassion to some
Mm.
missed moments.
Don't we all?
But then yeah, I think then that's what I looked at. I was like, oh, but yeah, I still over the last have done so much better, give myself a little grace. I think that's a
Absolutely.
hard thing to I think when we're trying to teach kids these difficult intrinsic discipline, motivational things that are difficult for all of us. And
Absolutely.
so I liked how you separated the goals versus expectations. So I
Hmm.
think a lot of times kids feel expectations and less presence of goals.
Absolutely. And self-compassion is a very difficult concept for athletes as well because we're driven people, right? We want to see progress, and telling myself that it's okay that I had a mistake feels like I'm letting myself off the hook. When in reality, it's not, right? I am treating myself kindly to raise myself up to then have purposeful action towards my goal, right? It's two pieces. It's the kindness and self awareness, but then it's also this movement, purposeful action towards change.
Well, time is flying. You are throwing out some tons of great stuff. Um, One of the things that I wanted to ask as we wrap up, if we gave you a time machine And let's say we took you to like, the turn after the ninth hole to teenage self, some course. Um, what would you want to remind your teenage self in kind of your journey and your experiences you've had now helping so many athletes? What would you want to remind yourself before the back nine?
Mm, breathe, number one. Breathing is the best thing that you could ever teach yourself to do. And then, I think gratitude, have some gratitude, take a step back, see the bigger picture. Um, this is a beautiful opportunity and experience. And how lucky are you? Right. And that perspective then opens up this world of it's not that big of a deal. Just enjoy where you're at. And then all of a sudden, that pressure just feels a little lighter.